Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this video. Story 1. I've been around WWE for a long time. Not as a wrestler. No, I never had the size for that. But I've spent a decade in production, handling backstage interviews, running cameras, setting up lighting. I've been in the locker rooms after the crowds go home, walked the empty arenas when the echoes of the last match still hang in the air. I've seen things, heard things, but nothing ever got to me like what happened last year at Madison Square Garden. That night, I was the last one left. The show had wrapped hours ago. The wrestlers were gone. The crew mostly packed up. I was just about done too, but I'd forgotten a battery pack in the locker room. It was nearly 1 a.m., and the place was dead silent. That kind of silence that presses against your ears, makes you feel like you're underwater. The kind that makes every little noise, the hum of a vending machine, the distant creak of metal, seem 100 times louder. The locker room was dim, just one row of overhead lights buzzing faintly. Everything had a yellowish tint, like an old photograph left too long in the sun. I moved quickly, not because I was scared, but because I wanted to be done. I found the battery sitting on a bench near the mirror. Bent down to grab it. That's when I saw it. A figure standing in the farthest corner of the room. At first, I thought it was someone playing a prank, one of the guys messing with me. But this thing, it wasn't right. It was too tall, almost unnaturally so, and its shape was wrong. Not like a person, not exactly. No face, no details, just a tall, black shape, darker than the shadows around it. I felt my pulse spike, a sharp stab of ice down my spine. My first instinct was to turn around, to see if it was really there. But some deep, primal part of me whispered, "Don't." I turned anyway. Nothing. The corner was empty. I swallowed hard, my skin prickling all over. My breath sounded too loud in my own ears. Maybe it had been a trick of the light. Maybe I was just overtired. I told myself that, forced myself to believe it. I grabbed the battery, straightened up, and turned toward the door. That's when I made the mistake of looking in the mirror again. The figure was closer, not just a little closer, right behind me. I didn't think. I didn't breathe. I ran. I didn't care about the battery, didn't care about the lights, didn't even look back. I sprinted out of that locker room, down the hallway, through the empty arena, all the way to the parking lot. My chest was burning, my hands shaking as I fumbled for my car keys. I sat in my car for a long time, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I told myself I was being stupid, that it was my imagination running wild. But deep down, I knew better. A few weeks later, I was talking to one of the veteran wrestlers, a guy who had been with WWE for over 20 years. I don't know why I brought it up. Maybe I just needed to hear someone say it was nothing, that I was overreacting. But when I told him about the shadow in the locker room, about how it had moved closer, his face changed. He didn't laugh, didn't tell me I was crazy. Instead, he just nodded. "You saw him too, huh?" he said, voice low. "A lot of us have." I asked him what it was. He just shook his head. "No one knows. But whatever it is, it's been here a long time." I never worked late alone again. Story 2. I used to think wrestling arenas were just buildings, just places where matches happened, crowds cheered, and wrestlers put their bodies on the line. Just a job, just a paycheck. But after what I experienced in the old Civic Center, I know better. Some places remember. Some places hold on to things that should have been forgotten. It was a small Midwest city, the kind you pass through on a long drive and forget as soon as you're gone. The Civic Center was a relic from the 50s, a squat, gray building with rust-streaked walls and a parking lot full of cracks and weeds. WWE had a house show there, one of those smaller events they run between TV tapings. I was part of the ring crew, handling setup and teardown. I've been doing it for years, so I wasn't new to late nights and empty arenas. But that night felt different from the moment we arrived. The place stank of mildew and old popcorn grease. The lights in the hallways flickered, buzzing like dying flies. The locker rooms were cramped, their walls stained yellow from years of cigarette smoke and sweat. But it wasn't just the decay that got to me, it was the silence. Most arenas, even empty, have a kind of presence, an echo of the noise that once filled them. Not this one. This one was quiet in a way that made my skin crawl. I should have known something was wrong when one of the old janitors, a guy with a stooped back and hands like twisted tree roots, saw us unloading the truck and muttered, "Still using this place, huh?" Never could scrub it out. I asked him what he meant. He just shook his head and walked away. The show itself went fine, better than expected. Actually, the crowd was rowdy, the matches were solid, and we wrapped up by 11 p.m. Most of the crew left right after, but a few of us stayed behind to break down the ring. It was me, two other guys, and one of the younger wrestlers helping out. We were exhausted, working in near silence, just the occasional scrape of metal or thud of a chair breaking the stillness. That's when I saw it. One of the entrance curtains leading to the stage was moving. It was subtle, just a slow ripple like fingers trailing across the fabric from the inside. At first, I thought maybe a draft had gotten in, but the air in that place was thick and still. No vents nearby, no open doors, just that quiet, suffocating weight pressing down on everything. I nudged the guy next to me. "You see that?" He nodded. Thought it was just me. The curtain stopped. We stared for a long second, waiting for something, anything, to happen. But it just hung there, limp and lifeless. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe our tired brains were playing tricks on us. Then we heard it. A whisper. Not words. Not anything we could make out. Just a low, breathy sound, like someone speaking from far away. It wasn't coming from one spot. It moved, circling us, sliding along the walls, weaving through the rows of empty chairs. We froze. The young wrestler, the one who had been helping us, dropped the turnbuckle he was carrying. It clanged against the floor, echoing like a gunshot. The whispering stopped. For a moment, it was dead silent again. Then, thump, a single, heavy knock from underneath the ring. We all jumped back. The young wrestler swore under his breath, his face pale. Another thump, louder this time. I grabbed a flashlight and hesitated for half a second before dropping to my knees. I've been around wrestling rings my whole life. I know the sounds they make. This wasn't normal. This wasn't the creak of settling wood or shifting metal. I lifted the apron skirt and aimed the flashlight under the ring. Nothing, just shadows and a few stray zip ties left over from setup. No rats, no wind, no explanation. And yet, the second I lowered the fabric, thump, 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 something pounded against the wood from underneath, so fast and violent it shook the entire ring. The metal frame groaned. The ropes trembled. We ran. We didn't finish teardown. We didn't pack up properly. We grabbed what we could and bolted, leaving cables, tools, and half the ring still standing. I didn't breathe easy until I was in my car, hands shaking as I tried to turn the key. The others peeled out of the lot without even saying goodbye. The next morning, my boss called, pissed that we'd left everything behind. I didn't tell him what happened. What was I supposed to say? That a ghost knocked on the ring? That we got spooked by some whispers? No one would believe us. Hell, I barely believed it myself. But later that day, curiosity got the better of me. I looked up the Civic Center's history, and I found it. Back in the 70s, there was a local wrestler, nothing big, just a regional guy, who had a match there. Midway through, he collapsed. Heart attack, they said. Died right there in the ring. But the weird part, the newspaper article mentioned something else. When the medics got to him, his hands were clenched so tightly against the mat that it took 3 men to pry them off. The last thing he did before he died was pound his fists against the canvas. Just like what we heard. I've been in a lot of arenas since then. Big ones, small ones, historic venues, crumbling bingo halls. But I've never set foot in that Civic Center again. And I never will. Story 3. I don't know why he told me. Maybe because we were drunk. Maybe because he thought I wouldn't believe him. Maybe he just needed someone else to carry the weight of it for a little while. Either way, he told me. And now, I can't stop seeing it either. My friend, let's call him Mark, had been an indie wrestler for years, grinding away in half-filled gyms, driving 8 hours for a $50 payday, praying for the one call that could change everything. When WWE finally invited him to a tryout at the Performance Center, it was his shot. A shot he walked away from without a word of explanation. It was late when he told me why. I could smell the whiskey on his breath, see the way his hands trembled around the glass. This wasn't a story he liked telling. The tryout had been brutal. 2 days of drills, training, and being pushed past every physical limit. Most of the guys looked like they were about to collapse. But Mark stayed late that second night, alone in the ring, working on his moves. He wasn't about to waste this opportunity. And then he saw the man, standing in the far corner of the Performance Center, just beyond the stretch of the overhead lights. Watching, Mark assumed it was a coach, maybe an old school guy who had come in to check out the talent. The man was wearing a classic wrestling robe, deep red, trimmed with gold, the kind legends wore back in the 70s. But something felt off. The way he stood, completely still, hands at his sides, posture stiff as a corpse. Just watching. Mark nodded at him, acknowledging him, waiting for some kind of reaction. The man didn't move, didn't blink, didn't even seem to be breathing. Mark tried to shake it off, went back to running the ropes. When he turned again, the man was closer, right at the edge of the ring now, just beyond the apron, still watching, still silent. Mark felt his stomach knot up, but he forced himself to keep going. If this was a test of mental toughness, he wasn't going to fail. Then the man stepped into the light. Mark saw his face. And that was when he knew that this wasn't a coach, wasn't a wrestler, wasn't human. His eyes were missing, not closed, not hidden in shadow gone. Empty, gaping voids where his eyes should have been. And his mouth, Jesus, his mouth was stretched into a grin that wasn't right. Not a normal smile, not even an exaggerated one. It was too wide, the skin pulled tight and unnatural, like someone had taken a razor blade and carved it there. Mark blinked, just for a second, and when he opened his eyes, the man was in the ring with him, right in front of him, not climbing in, not stepping through the ropes, just there. Mark scrambled backward so fast he almost fell. His hand slapped the mat, his breath coming in sharp, shallow gasps. He could smell something rotten, something wet and wrong, like old sweat and dry blood. He shut his eyes, squeezed them tight, and when he looked again, the ring was empty. He was alone, except he knew he wasn't. Something was still there, watching, waiting. Mark got out of the ring, got his bag, walked out of the performance center, and never went back. He didn't return their calls, didn't explain, just disappeared from the business altogether. He said he still sees it sometimes, reflected in mirrors, standing at the edge of his bed at night, smiling, waiting. I don't know if it followed him, or if it's always been there, but I do know one thing. I believe him, and now so do you.